Let me introduce the two speakers that we have this morning. And I'm going to apologize in advance if I pronounce these names wrong. Gert-Jan Nabuurs, where are you, please? There. And also Harold Brugman, who's also there. With no more ado, let me welcome Gert-Jan, or just Gert?
Gert-Jan.
Gert-Jan, okay, officially. Your talk this morning is European scale, long-term effects of integrated and adaptive forest management on Europe's forest and its forest industry. So with no more ado, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you also for the clear warning that my head may be cut off. But we are starting 15 minutes late already, right?
No forgiveness in this world.
Oi, oi, oi. Right, thank you. Yeah, and I'm really happy to be here. And, usually I talk in front of foresters, but it's very nice now to address a different community. And, who knows, I may be able to convey a certain message. I hope so. Well, how do you do? That is a normal thing that I live in a small village in the east of the Netherlands. And how do you do is what we say to everybody that we meet on the street. And normally the answer is, well, good. But if we say it with a slightly different tone, how are you? Then there's already a sort of a pre-knowledge, that something is going on. And how are the forests doing? That is a question that I often get. Certainly from the somewhat more senior people, they often refer to the acid rain of the 80s and the early 90s. And then the answer is much more difficult. How are the forests doing? And here on this picture, I'm hanging at 4 meter height in a tree, downloading data from an automatic tree dendrometer. It measures the diameter of the tree every hour, and in that way, we have a sort of the finger on the pulse of the tree, what is going on. But then still, the answer is very difficult. And I will take you through this. I will swamp you with a lot of numbers. I hope you manage to deal with that. Say something about the state of Europe's forests. What are the current assessments and the challenges with this? Then I'll tell you a little bit about what we are doing in Wageningen with our European scale modeling. A little bit what it means at the hectare scale in terms of integrated forest management and the financial side of it. Take you to a regional case of forest restoration from the Superb project in the North Rhine-Westphalia. And then even some full European scale results. So let's see if I can manage this in the remaining 20 minutes. Well, European forests. Europe is covered with, well, we certainly overdo the indicators of CECIL, with close to 40% forest cover in the European lands. A wide diversity of forest types. It's practically all managed, 99% managed. A lot of private owners, but partly also public owners. Huge cultural, historical diversity in management styles. And that has also created a certain type of biodiversity. And the thinking very much in the 90s, so after the acid rain period, the thinking in the 90s and early 2000s was very much, there's plenty of forest. We have growing resources. There's more and more forests in Europe, more and more also standing, growing wood in the forest. And that was the thinking very much in the 90s. And we are in the lucky circumstances that for our projects, we get to travel over all of Europe, luckily with colleagues. And that shows this enormous variety across Europe, depending also on the regional demands, the societal demands, the urbanized society in Europe that puts certain demands on the forest. And that's really reflected in the state of the forest and the diversity. Huge diversity, very nice, up to the very northern Lapland forest, down to the cork oak of Spain. And of course, the most beautiful forests are found in the Netherlands. They're in here, which I welcome you all to visit. So a growing resource. And this is a reflection of the statistics in Europe. You know, countries do a national forest inventory. They have to report to UNECE and FAO the state of the forests. And they usually do that in terms of growing stock, increment, area, rather wood-oriented indicators, I would say. But they do say something about the state of forests. Now you can see that the increment has increased a lot, but the fellings, the harvesting also increased, but much less. And that created the difference is what you build up every year in the forest. That is the carbon sink that you build up in the forest every year. But this paper that I referred to here already showed there was something seemed to be changing in European forests. You see that the increment is just starting to level off. And if you have that trend in a very large resource, then it's very difficult to change that trend, because what is happening now is the result of the management activities 50, 60 years ago. So if you see that trend, there is an important indicator. So would that resource be under pressure then? Are there signs of climate change? That's what we also ask. And this paper is with Mark Hanewinkel from Freiburg, and Nick Zimmerman and others, portraying that if climate change happens in a certain speed, what would it mean and where each tree species is? You know, a tree species has a certain niche where it can grow. And if the climate changes, then these tree species would have to shift. And the purple areas here is Norway spruce, where it could grow currently. And then we projected that if you change the climate, and a rather drastic climate, that in 2070, Norway spruce could only survive in the northern regions. Now we thought, well, you know, it's a model, and it's 2070, you know, who cares? You know, this is far away. But we were overtaken by reality, as you can see here. I'm sure that also in the urban areas, the messages have come across of massive spruce decline in Central Europe, especially. All the brown areas are, of course, dead spruce. This is the Harz. I think this has surprised all of us. It certainly surprised me. And there were warnings already earlier on, but I think it surprised all of us, how fast these processes are going. Then we can put this in numbers, and we projected this with our old modeling tools, and I'll take you through the numbers here. You know, countries have to report to UNFCCC what the carbon sinks and the emissions are. The annual greenhouse gas balance needs to be reported to UNFCCC. Forests are also part of that. Forests, usually the European forests, tended to take up carbon, and a take up of carbon is depicted as a negative number. So the Czech forests were taking up 8 million tons of CO2 annually during these years in the dashed line. Then we said if you employ a climate-smart forestry, and we already foresaw some problems with the spruce coming up, we say if you gradually change your forest resource, then you will take your forest resource through a small source, but hopefully when it starts to grow again and starts to respond, this adaptive forest management, you're able to regain that sink. That's what we thought. But the reality, again, was far different. And I'm sure you see the big peak here. This is this spruce, the bark beetle problems, which leads to an emission of 15 million tons of CO2. It's now these emissions are coming down, but nobody knows how this will go in the future. So another message is also our projections are usually wrong. That's maybe good to keep in mind as well. We were again overtaken by the reality. And this is then how this is added up in the EU. This is the reporting to the UNFCCC, the whole, it's called the land use and land use change forestry sector. How they report, this is the sink, 400 million tons of CO2, was rather stable, and this sink is declined. If it goes up here, it means it's less negative, you have less uptake. So declining sink, and even declining further now. Partly this is also how we are managing our forests nowadays. The paradigm of ever-growing resources has also changed. And in the 90s and the 2000s, and certainly the forestry sector also portrays itself as the savior of the climate and wants to stimulate a bioeconomy. We're all sitting here on these wooden benches and the paper booklets. But that also means you have to harvest. And if you harvest, it has a quick effect. So here is the economic recession, 2009. And then the harvest, for example, in Finland started to pick up very rapidly again. The harvest has really increased a lot. Finland, Sweden, also in Germany, and then the bark beetle problems. So this is changing really rapidly. And this is causing this decline in the sink. And it's not only the mortality, it's also the more subtle changes that you might not see so quickly that have an impact. The droughts of 2018, 19, 21, they really have an impact on the growth of the trees. We try to follow that with these dendrometers that was in the first picture. And this is a publication by Masses et al. on fir, silver fir, and it shows it in the lower and medium altitude, the basal area increments, or how the basal area, the surface of the trees, you could say, the surface of the stems, how that is. It used to increase, the basal area increment, and somewhere early 2000s there is a change, and the trend is really going down. And this is corrected for age effects and such. So and that was not so visible, but it's certainly a trend that is going on. Then assessments, European assessments. I showed some data already. And there have been long attempts to try to collect European information and trying to harmonize that across the European countries, where they all spend a lot of money in national forest inventories. And here I'm holding up the books that were made by Risto Päivinen at the European Forest Institute in 1997 already. And it's called the European Forest Information and Communication System. How to harmonize all of that, how to bring all of that together. And I'm afraid that since then, we haven't made a whole lot of progress in this area. Through various reasons, political reasons, financial reasons, monopoly of certain people reasons, all sort of reasons, we have not made a lot of progress. And also the more subtle habitat state, the biodiversity is even much more difficult to assess. Like countries also have to report under Article 17 of the Natura 2000. The habitat reporting, it's called, even that has its even more challenges, and in the end, it results in simple green and red colors for big habitat types in different countries, and despite a lot of effort, this results in appallingly bad sort of overall red, green, and orange colors. And the State of Europe Forest, Forest Europe is another process to collect data and to stimulate processes. And even there, I must say, if you look at the statistics books, it's appallingly bad that these tables are half empty. Usually my glass is half full, but this is half empty. Countries spend 60 million euro per year on national forest inventories, and they're not even able all to report increment. And increment is a very important indicator what the state and the health of the trees is. Data are old, they're not complete. If you really look at the numbers, it's even much worse. So lots to do. So clearly, this needs to improve. Some of the challenges we have, large-scale plantations with the susceptibility. This is the photo I showed, Norway spruce with its problems. So things need to change. I'll show you a little bit of our modeling effort. Since 2013, we have moved into a much more detailed modeling effort for European forest, where, countries do a national forest inventory. Here you see a photo of a forest area, and every kilometer there's a very small plot where the field crews go every 5 or 10 years and they remeasure the same trees. Once you do that for many, many plots. That says something about the state of the forest and how it changes, how it's growing, how it's dying, how it's managed. And those data we have gathered since 2013 from many countries. It's a totally voluntary and personal contracts basis. But since then we have gathered 400,000 plots, 5 million trees that are remeasured, and that tells us something about the state of the forest. And all these colors are plots. So these are the countries we have. In the meantime, also Finland and even Austria came in. So that's a big change. So with that, I can very simply say we can forward project the state of Europe's forest. We fit growth models, we fit mortality models, and then you have these are number of trees for one plot, distribution over diameter classes, and that is, it moves forward. You cut some, it moves forward, it dies, etc. I'll skip that one. What does that look like at the hectare scale for integrated forest management? This is again a picture of a beautiful Dutch forest. We can then compare different management styles. The top one is a clear-cut system, even-age clear-cut system, which you would cut after 10 years. My voice is already giving up. So the growing stock in a clear-cut system, you cut it here and you let it regrow. So that's 500 cubic meter per hectare. It says something about the state of the forest. This is the harvest, big harvest here and then thinnings here. In a continuous cover forestry, like here in the picture, you keep that forest there and you thin away the biggest trees every 5 or 10 years. That is, and then there is natural regeneration, hopefully. You maintain the growing stock, so the fluxes are not so big, but you harvest every 5 or 10 years a certain amount. That we can also combine with a financial module, because this has certain advantages. It's more, you can do it at larger scale. If the harvester comes, he can do larger areas. This is more complex. You have to select a tree here and there. It will cost you more, but you also have bigger trees in the end. And then you have to make assumptions, do the sawmills, do they want the really big Douglas fir, and what will the prices be? So we have to make a lot of assumptions there. But at least at the hectare scale, we can analyze that. And I'll just show you that the annuity, how much money do you make per hectare with these different systems and with the different assumptions, that they're actually very close. And it really depends on, do I have to plant in a clear-cut system, or can the small clear-cuts also regenerate naturally? How do the sawmills like these big diameters? It really depends on that. And then the annuity is really close to each other. So that was a hectare scale. Then we move up a little bit higher. This is also Dutch forest. We say it's the operation successful, but the patient died. The test was successful, but the patient died. Pichia Amorica, after the 2019 droughts, it really fell totally away. North Rhine-Westphalia, roughly 854,000 hectares. Here you look with a 3D view on that area, and every point where they have measured the trees, the National Forest Inventory plots, is one bar, and the color is the main tree species. The dark green here, this is the Sauerland area, and the dark green bars is Norway spruce. The more purple kind is long-lived broadleaves, etc. The Netherlands is here for your. 12% of the area was damaged by bark beetle, and so under the Superb project we we apply a restoration scenario where you plant more mixed tree species in these affected areas. But first we have a baseline development where the bark beetle will continue to rage through that area. Average growing stock goes down for the whole area. And under the restoration, where you, again, this bark beetle continues to some degree, you have to make assumptions on that, and then these new tree species that you plant, they start to regrow. And that is the increase in average volume that you see here. So you can take that system through a restoration, but it takes time. It takes a lot of time. This is 2100, and the first decades you still lose some 50 million tons of CO2. That's a consequence of what is going on. Another consequence of the restoration is that you take the system through that restoration phase, but restoring also means you're raging through that area. And that means you have a peak of the harvest now, 14 cube per hectare per year. That also means that in the future you can harvest less. So that will have consequences for the industry as well in the longer term. And that's something that I think the industry is generally worried about it, but does not really act upon this. And here you see again how the different tree species, how they constitute the whole area of North Rhine-Westphalia, and how gradually spruce becomes less, sweet chestnut comes in, the long-lived broadleaves come in, beech as well, and the oaks are also suffering. Well, I'll leave. And then means we really do our best to try and find a visualization of this. Well, if you compare, there is now less spruce here in the Sauerland, more fagus, more long-lived broadleaf, short-lived broadleaf. It's a way to visualize this at the medium scale. Well, now we run this for the whole of Europe. So 11 years of data gathering, a lot of travels, EU projects, a lot of preparation, and then 2 weeks of runs on very fast servers. And then you get a lot of lines again, which I'm sure you will be happy with. These are all where we have 18 countries at that time. What does that mean? We just look at Switzerland as we're here. This means that under a business as usual with climate change, a business as usual, also the Swiss forest will be under pressure. The battery is low, gone. My pointer is gone. I'll depict it like this. So, under the climate change also has on the growth rate a bit of a positive effect, that certain species also start to grow faster, and the growing stock that you see there, the yellow line, builds up. But certainly with a business as usual, with the climate change and disturbances, the red line, the fire and wind disturbances also increase under climate change. And the red line you see certainly dropping even faster in the beginning. Then we have applied, we are in an integrated forest management, a more adaptive forest management, like I showed for North Rhine-Westphalia, more resilient species. And that is the dark green line for Switzerland, where you see when we apply that adaptation, the growing stock starts to pick up again. Yeah, well, this still works. Next slide. Then we can also show what this means for the industry. Large changes in the forest resource eventually also have impacts on the industry. This is one aerial view on an Irish mill, a panel mill that uses 400,000 cubic meter. So we can connect, that's the 5 minutes, right? Good. We can connect this resource changes to what it means for the industry. And that looks like this, and now I must go up. One of our PhD students did this. I can use this pointer, I think. Yeah. Here are some, I'll just show you the North Rhine-Westphalia area here, which is this one, number 3. You see these lines, and that means that when we harvest an inventory plot, that wood goes to, there's a mill here. In the center of these arrows, there's a mill that asks for wood. So we connect that in that way. And the dark green means that the demand from that mill is supplied. The red colors means you're running into a shortage. And either the mill shuts down or reduces capacity. So we can at least quantify what the impacts will be. And where you see the red colors in the longer term, here in Czech, there will be problems in the future. North Rhine-Westphalia will have problems in the future. Southern Sweden will have problems in the future. The harvesting is already at a very high level. So more problems in the resource, changes in the resource, will cause problems for the industry. Now, one of the last. So there's no doubt that we need to change this resource to changing demands, not only changing demands from society, but also adapting it to climate change. And this integrated forest management, which we have been talking about two days here, is one way to go at that. We can show what it means in a very detailed level in certain regions up to the full European scale and the national scales. This data gathering and assessments, we really try to fill a big gap there. I showed you some examples how poor that gathering and assessment currently is. There will certainly be more deciduous wood available in the future, less coniferous. That's something the industry will have to deal with. And certainly, well, also less harvest is something that we will have to count on. And that also means it requires the industry to be more efficient with its resource use. Thank a lot of people, National Forest Inventory people, but certainly want to thank all my colleagues, because in the end, science is a lot about working and having fun with a lot of colleagues in Wageningen, and still also with some people at the European Forest Institute. So that's the way to thank them and all the hard work that is behind all the number crunching here. Yeah, thank you.
Because he's been so good at timing, I can take one question. Does anybody have something they would really leave Switzerland regretting not to have asked? Or, oh, you would leave Switzerland regretting not to have asked? Go on then. Shout out, please, very loud.
You mentioned that one of the types of the forest management is to take the biggest trees out of the forest, and you are dealing with CO2. My views are that the biggest trees they sequester the most of carbon, like the study of Mumo and white pine stands in the North America forests. Mm-hmm. Isn't it better to get maybe a middle-sized trees and to keep the biggest ones to store to get the capacity contribute?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. That's an intriguing question. Certainly, big trees contain a lot of carbon, but when you do this continuous cover forestry in the proper way, of course you do take out a few big trees. But you have sufficient regrowth in your middle-sized and young trees, and you stimulate the regeneration. So overall, the stand as a whole should not be affected too much. Certainly, I don't want to say that we have a very little real old growth and real primary forests in Europe, and those I think we should put a stricter restriction on, a stricter protection on. because they also harbor a lot of other the biodiversity effects. But in the continuous cover forestry system, you can take out big trees without influencing this carbon balance too much.